So, I've heard of the concept of 5 different love languages, actually, during a conversation with my mom and my sisters. Was it sometime last year, perhaps a year ago, 2 years? I don't particularly remember exactly the date, but I remember being rather befuddled by the concept. And then over a while, across the internet, I hear young ladies bring up 5 different their love languages. I've seen it on Hinge from time to time what their love languages are. And I remember instinctually always being bothered by the concept itself. And I think a huge chunk of it comes from the fact that I've noticed that whenever any woman kind of grasps upon any like pop psych term, it's always used as a measuring stick to judge how men fail at something. Again, take the concept of emotional intelligence. It's not even so far as much as I disagree that there is a concept or that emotional intelligence would be describing a concept of which one has a great understanding of their own emotions and the emotions of other people. That makes perfect sense. The issue is that oftentimes the women who like to employ that term, ironically, oftentimes show how they themselves truly lack emotional intelligence. I mean, just from the offset of just basic empathy, putting yourself in the place of other people and understanding their perspective and how they got to where they are. This is actually a rather great example of hitting 2 birds with 1 stone with this concept. The concept of the irony of utilizing emotional intelligence as a measuring stick for how men fail, but also my commentary on love languages as a concept and how they're a bit goofy. So, what started this off? I'm certain any long-time subscriber, any subscriber would have seen this video I uploaded probably recently to this one. And that is this woman, I forget her name, Ali something? I don't know. This blonde woman makes a lot of TikToks that honestly really explain why she does not need to be in a relationship. But one in particular she made that I'm glad a lot of young men who commented on her TikTok kind of called her out on was this one. Here where she explains that, you know what? Let's go in fresh. I'll let you guys see what she says.
My primary love language is physical touch.
I posted a story on Instagram about how all men put physical touch as their love language. Now, I thought this was because they think physical touch means physical touch. I mean, I just went through this morning and found like 10 of them, so it's all over.
So, I find it interesting that, for one, there's no critical analysis, no thought on her part. Only one of the most uncharitable thoughts I've ever seen given to young men, which just really confirms just how little a lot of ladies just really think about men's humanity. But I just find it rather interesting that she has no empathy, no thought as to why so many young men would say that their love language, the way of which they receive love, would be through physical touch. Perhaps they may be touch starved. Perhaps they don't get touched very often. They don't get hugs very often. They don't get even a pat on the back very often. They don't get very much affirmations in general very often. I mean, I find it interesting, throughout the course of my life, I've been affirmed so little, I have strong core memories of when I have been affirmed. It's funny. It's interesting, actually. In fact, even when people comment on my YouTube channel, I always say thank you. I spent a huge chunk of my life not being complimented. It's interesting to me that there's just such a total lack of empathy in trying to really grasp and understand why do so many young men feel this way? Why would sex and sexuality be the method or be the way in which so many young men need to receive love, or why would they say that?
Now, I thought this was because they think physical touch means physical touch. I mean, I just went through this morning and found like 10 of them, so it's all over. And when I posted it on Instagram, there's no way they all have the same love language. This girl replied and said that her therapist told her men don't understand the psychology behind love languages. Every man between the age of 18 and 25, I would argue it goes way older than that, will say their love language is physical touch. She's pretty spot on. He has high emotional intelligence if it's not physical touch.
So, as I keep saying, this video is actually drenched with a lot of irony. One of them being if you notice, she actually wishes to dismiss young men's need, or, the trend of men saying that their love language is physical touch, by assuming they misunderstood it as sexual intercourse or sexual intimacy or one or the other. Now, the reason why this is a bit strange is because our lady friend here is not above at all. I would dare say that probably the main bulk of why she's popular on TikTok at all is because she's sexually attractive to some degree. Now, some of you guys in the audience may not agree with that, but considering the fact that she is not a kind person, and she has shown herself in numerous different TikToks to not really be a particularly empathetic person, and she's also shown herself to not really even be that much of an intelligent person either, it really does go on to show that the only thing that kind of gets her as far as she's gotten is just because she's attractive. Like, she's not a profound thinker. Again, she's not kind-hearted. I've seen multiple different TikToks. She's not a nice, she's just, honestly, she really shouldn't be in a relationship with anyone, honestly, just kind of based on the things that she's decided to just post on the internet herself. But the long and short of it is, she wishes to besmirch these young men's love language being physical touch because she assumes that it's just them desiring sexual intercourse or sexuality, yet she uses men's desire for intercourse and sexuality to predicate the popularity of her TikTok. It's interesting how quite the two-step there is. I think once again being one fantastic example of just how much she herself lacks emotional intelligence, because she doesn't even understand the cognitive dissonance in her own mind here.
And when I posted it on Instagram, there's no way they all have the same love language. This girl replied and said that her therapist told her men don't understand the psychology behind love languages. Every man between the age of 18 and 25, I would argue it goes way older than that, will say their love language is physical touch. She's pretty spot on. You know he has high emotional intelligence if it's not physical touch. I genuinely think this is 100% true. They do not comprehend what the love languages actually mean and the concept behind them, and they can't imagine feeling emotionally attached to a woman if it's not somehow physical. And I think that the thing that's funny about it is they think they're showing emotional intelligence by using the prompt, "My love language is," when in reality they're telling us that their emotional intelligence is very low.
The reason why I spent so much time really analyzing this, and not even really doing the deep dive I could, was to kind of show you guys over and over and over again just how stupid and useless a term emotional intelligence is. Or at the very least, when the people are using the term emotional intelligence, it kind of muddles the water. Because it actually could be something that makes a good amount of sense. It could be something that's important to discuss. But the people who own the conversation, I'll put in quotations, or the people that lead the conversations typically are women who are hurt, who want to use it as a measuring stick to beat men down and say, you're not good at something, you need to do better. When in all actuality, the women that keep talking about this stuff are the ones who don't really have an understanding or true mastery of the concept, or how important it is, or how to really apply it in any functional way that makes sense. So, let's actually talk about love languages. Now, from what I can gather, love languages are the way that people receive love and affection and the way that they display them to other people. Now again, instinctually, something always kind of rubs me the wrong way about this concept. Once again, because I've noticed a lot of young women were using it and a lot of young women were saying it. And just like we saw in the TikTok, I knew they were going to use it as another measuring stick to beat men down and tell them that they're not doing another thing good or well enough. But despite the fact that I knew that that was going to happen, it wasn't really the full picture of why it bothered me as a concept. It wasn't until I really started really thinking hard about, why does this concept bother me? Why do I have such a visceral reaction to it? Did it finally arrive to me? And it's actually rather simple. It's because, in principle, love languages kind of miss the point. And what I mean by that kind of miss the point is that understanding what the concept of love really is. Now, there's multiple different ways people define the term love. But for this philosophical discussion, let's agree or have this understanding that love between most human beings, or at least between relationships with human beings, is the measure of selflessness that people have for each other. Now, typically when people use the concept of love, what they're really talking about is all of the good feelings that they get from a person, in the same way they're talking about all the good feelings they get from an object or from an experience. I love roller coasters. I love video games. I love reading. It's a very selfish thing. That's really just a way to say that you really like something. It's like saying, I like squared. It's just in abundance of great favor towards something that you enjoy. And thus, you can say, I love a person because you enjoy them. But that isn't the same type of love, I guess one you would say, or isn't the same way you could use the term love when you're explaining how a parent relates to a child. You might love the experience of raising a child, but in reality, loving a child is all about the things you're giving to them. The selflessness, the fact that they're more or less a helpless individual that can't really do anything, and you have to give what you have to them to give them a better life or to give them some semblance of a life. Of course, there are parents that have no regard for their children at all, but extenuating circumstances aside, we have to have some understanding that love for an object isn't really the same love that you have for people. Or at least it should not be the case, but oftentimes it is. In fact, I would argue that one of the main reasons why a lot of our modern day relationships are so crappy is because people don't love people selflessly, but selfishly. As in, they love all the things that they can get from the person and all the feelings and emotions and experiences they have, but they don't love the person, or rather, they don't have a selfless protective desire for the person to help them out. They're not giving to the person as much as they're hoping that they keep getting something. Now, of course, relationships are a little bit more complex than that, as in, you can't really just be entirely selfless and just giving to someone. There does need to be some expectation of receiving as well, but that goes beyond the scope of this conversation. So, with that understanding, we'll just table that discussion for another time. What's important for this conversation, though, when we're talking about the 5 different love languages that we have, the reason why I feel like they kind of missed the point is because typically, instead of people recognizing something pretty important about them, and that is, these are the ways that people are expressing the way they feel, they're using it as a way of which they're supposed to receive the love themselves, which is a really muddled different way of saying they're still looking at the concept selfishly instead of selflessly. As in, they're looking at it as a way to get or pigeonhole or transmit love in a manner of which they want it. I've seen on Hinge time and time and time again when women talk about the way they receive love. But I have never seen a single one ever say how they give it out. Because it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple why that's the case. Again, they're being selfish. And the problem here is actually rather simple. And it's a really simple problem here. And that simple problem is this. The way people communicate love doesn't change the fact that they love you. In other words, for example, let's say that your love language is receiving gifts, and the person that you're with doesn't like giving you gifts. However, they still do acts of services. They still physically touch you. They still give you quality time. They give you everything else. They express the way they love in different ways except giving you gifts. Now, of course, being a selfish person, you would say that that person doesn't love you because they're not doing or performing love in a manner of which you want to receive it. And again, to me, I feel like that misses the point entirely. Because you're being selfish about what you're trying to get from the person rather than being selfless and understanding that that's how this person is communicating how they feel. If someone is trying to protect you, take care of you, make sure your life is easier and better, but they don't like splurging on a bunch of expensive gifts that they just don't find a lot of value in, I'll be frank, that's kind of me. I'm not that kind of person. It doesn't mean that the way they feel isn't accurate. It doesn't mean that they don't love you. And it seems silly to me to refuse to accept them loving you because they're not doing it or performing it in a manner of which you want to receive it. That's typically how I see people use the concept. Again, people don't use the concept in a manner of which they can explain how they're able to give it to people. They kind of want to make it so that men change. It is particularly, I don't see men say this. I'm sorry, I've never seen a man do this, but I've seen plenty of young ladies do this. Typically, it is young women saying that they want men to perform in a particular way, rather than it's young ladies saying that they have an understanding of themselves and they need to expand the way they feel in order to receive the different ways that young men are expressing themselves to them. In another ironic sense, the women I typically see who constantly talk about the 5 different love languages really show just their hilarious lack of emotional intelligence. And that is, some people not performing in the manner of which you want doesn't mean that they don't feel the way you think that they feel, or rather they don't feel. It might be the better way to say that sentence. Just because someone doesn't spend a good amount of quality time with you doesn't mean that they're not going to express the way they love you in different ways, in different manners. And in all honesty, you shouldn't have a specific love language. It would actually make more sense that you just recognize the different ways people are expressing themselves. It doesn't make any sense to pigeonhole yourself into only being able to accept love in one different way. Why is it only that you can get love when someone gives you a gift? Why is it only that you can feel loved when someone touches you? Why is it only that you can feel love when someone spends time with you? Shouldn't it be an amalgamation of multiple different ways of which someone is responding? A different ebb and flow to the way life works, to the way time works, to the way a human works and grows and experiences time and space? Wouldn't it make more sense that instead of having particular love languages, that you just have one, an ebb and flow, as I said before, where you're recognizing that the person is acting differently in a different situation? I guess not. In conclusion, I'm not saying that emotional intelligence, and I'm not even saying that talking about 5 different love languages are actually stupid. I mean, I know I was kind of being funny about it and snarky, but I don't actually think those concepts are pointless. I actually don't think that it's dumb to have a recognition of needing emotional intelligence, and I don't even think it's dumb having a recognition of how people receive love and how people perform love and whatnot. I don't at all. However, typically, I don't see these concepts being used in any effective manner to make any discourse on these relationships better. It's always a measuring stick as to how men suck and women are better at something, and men need to keep doing better because they're just not performing well. And honestly, constantly talking about how men suck and are terrible, not a good relationship is ever going to make. I'm going to be completely honest with you. We really need to start thinking very critically here and asking ourselves a very important question. If these are the people, men, women, that you're supposed to have intimate, loving relationships with, why do we always speak about them with such disdain? I'll leave you guys with that to think about. So that being said, I just hope you guys got something out of today's video, and if you did, go ahead and click the like button. Yeah, shoot, go and click that subscribe button. Comment in the comment box below, and as always, you guys have yourselves a great day. I'll see you cool cats soon. Adios.